So now we have the privilege of hearing from state policy leaders who supported many of these efforts. We are joined by 3 state senators, each from a state that has made laudable progress toward adopting and implementing the roadmap policies this past year. As I mentioned earlier, Hawaii enacted legislation to increase its minimum wage such that it will reach $18 an hour in 2028. And the state made its 20% EITC refundable and permanent. Senator San Buenaventura is joining us to discuss these impressive policy accomplishments. Also, Maryland increased its SNAP recertification interval from 6 to 12 months. And much more impressively, the state enacted 12 weeks of paid family leave. And Senator Hayes has joined us to discuss these policy wins. And we're also joined by Senator Bergen from North Carolina, who led the successful passage of a Medicaid expansion bill in the Senate. And he'll share with us where negotiations with the House stand and the likelihood that North Carolina will expand Medicaid this next year. Moderating this important conversation is Dr. Dan Worry. He's Senior Director of Early Learning at the Hunt Institute. And Dan has been a leader in the field of early care and education for decades and is known for his ability to engage elected officials in ways that create space for significant bipartisan support for policies that increase quality, access, and affordability for early education. Thank you all for joining us today, and I'll turn it over to you, Dan. Welcome.
Cynthia, thank you so much for that nice introduction, and what a treat to be with you and all of the great advocates for infants and toddlers around the country today. We are deeply grateful at the Hunt Institute for the good work of the Prenatal to 3 Policy Impact Center, and so just a treat to be here today with these 3 fantastic state senators who are leading on this particular topic. For those of you who may not be familiar with the work of the Hunt Institute, the Institute is located in Cary, North Carolina. We are the brainchild of Jim Hunt, who was the 4-term governor of North Carolina, served 16 years between 1977 and 2001 as governor of North Carolina. And the Institute is an education policy resource to the nation's governors and state lawmakers. And so I have the good fortune to lead our early childhood policy work in states across the country and to consult and to interact with great leaders like those that we have assembled today. As Cynthia mentioned, all 3 states, Hawaii, North Carolina, and Maryland, have taken legislative action this year to advance important policies for infants and toddlers and their families that are not only big steps forward for children, but also in alignment with the roadmap established by the Prenatal to 3 Policy Impact Center. So I am delighted today to introduce you to Hawaii State Senator Joy San Buenaventura, North Carolina Senator Jim Bergen, and Maryland Senator Antonio Hayes. It is great to be with all of you, and we're going to kick this conversation right off. I'm going to start by giving each of you an opportunity really to, just for 5 minutes or so, give each of you an opportunity to talk through the progress that has been made in your state and why, sort of where it stands, why it is important to children. And Senator San Buenaventura, maybe we'll begin in Hawaii. I know that you have had, as Cynthia mentioned here just a few moments ago, success here in the recent past in terms of raising the minimum wage, action on an earned income tax credit, and also some exciting news on Medicaid. So let me turn things over to you to share a little bit about the good news that's coming out of Hawaii.
Thank you so much, and aloha from Hawaii. So as Chair of Human Services, it is my pleasure to have not only co-introduced a number of these bills, but help pass them. So Hawaii, when we got into the pandemic, had the lowest unemployment rate in the U.S. And when the pandemic hit, we had the highest unemployment rate. So we had cut services down to the bone in 2020, 2021. But surprisingly, in 22, our revenues had increased substantially. So we were able to do the Medicaid expansion that we wanted. we were able to make EITC, the state earned income tax credit, refundable. We had only previously passed, only a few years earlier, having a state earned income tax credit. But to make it refundable and permanent this past session was a substantial leap. I had introduced bills to even allow employees to reduce their withholding so that they will be able to benefit from the earned income tax credit per wage instead of waiting until the end of the year when they file their taxes. But that bill has failed, but I intend to reintroduce it next year. And we are also thrilled that our minimum wage has increased because we're service industry in the state of Hawaii, because a lot of it is tourism and military. And the tourism, which is a service industry, are dependent upon minimum wage workers. So increasing it helps those, especially families who live paycheck to paycheck, will be able to hopefully be able to have their wages expand and cover more rents and more monies instead of being put in the hole every year. So we're thrilled. As you may pointed out, as of October 1st this year, from $10.10, it goes up to $12. Then it increases to $18 up for incrementally until 2028. And like I said, the biggest expansion was not only our Medicaid expansion to include postpartum 1 year after birth, but we also have expanded Medicaid to cover Medicaid dental. And that is a huge thing. And one of the things that also was one of my bills I was thrilled with that hasn't been covered here is my child wellness bill. It's an incentive for families to get their kids to be examined by a doctor, so that they'll be reimbursed up to $50 for transportation or any loss of wages when they take their kids to be examined. So those are the good news for the state of Hawaii for prenatal, and I'm turning it back to you.
Very exciting, Senator. Thank you for all of those exciting updates from Hawaii. And I want to turn to Senator Jim Bergen of the Institute's home state here in North Carolina. Senator Bergen, I know after much conversation, there has been progress on Medicaid expansion in North Carolina. Share with us a little bit about what's happening for kids in North Carolina.
Thank you, Dan. And I just want to thank you and the Hunt Institute, and Cynthia, thank you too. It's a pleasure to be with you all today to talk about something really important. You all know that we are one of 12 states that haven't expanded Medicaid. It's been a discussion ever since I've been in the Senate, and prior to that when I was even a county commissioner. And there was a lot of reasons and a lot of discussions about why not to do it. But after just years of talking and meeting with folks and looking at the amount of money involved and looking at the things that we could do, the decision was made that we needed to have a big, hearty discussion about it, and we did. And the Senate passed it with only 2 nay votes. So it went to the House. The House passed a different version. We are in negotiations now. Some of the stickling points are we have the CON, Certificate of Need process, is still in force in North Carolina, and there's a lot of us that feel like that needs to be changed, and especially around mental and opioid facilities. I personally think that we need to look at certain things on how they affect rural hospitals and make sure that we don't decimate our rural hospital system, but we also have to provide better services to folks. So one of the things we really did do that went into effect is we increased the coverage for women for postpartum coverage to 12 months. And we did that in the budget. So we did expand Medicaid. We went ahead and started looking at those things that we felt like would make an immediate difference. And that was one of the things we did. We also passed legislation to keep people on Medicaid when their children were taken and put in temporarily in foster care, because they would lose that service. And we didn't want people not going and getting treatment for either mental health issues or drug issues because they were losing coverage because their children had been temporarily taken away from them. So that was another big thing. The conservative thinking is that right now that we'll have a bigger discussion in December. I personally don't think we will pass anything until after the first of the year. I think there's some other details. We're still talking to the hospitals, all the folks that are involved, because there's a lot of people that are just concerned about the not only what it's going to do with the hospitals if we change the certificate of need, but also providing services. We're losing about $500 million a month by not expanding Medicaid, and there's a lot of things we could do. I'm actually sitting in a hotel boardroom right now. I just finished speaking to the addiction professionals of North Carolina, talking about this and a lot of other subjects, because it affects so many people. You know, it's hard for somebody to take care of their child if they've got a drug problem. It's hard for them to take care of their child if they've got a mental health problem. And I'm passionate about fixing those. I talk about mind, body, spirit. You know, we've got to do something to bring all those together, because you can't be physically healthy and have mental health issues. You can't be mentally healthy and have physical. It's all wrapped together. And I think there's a spiritual component that we I'm a believer. I believe that the spiritual component has to be part of all of these discussions as we deal with people. So be happy to kind of flesh out this conversation. Look forward to many more conversations. Appreciate everybody that's taking time to be here and listen. I've traveled to say my good friend, the senator from Hawaii. We've been at a number of meetings together, and I've thoroughly enjoyed getting to know her and some of her colleagues and other folks. Ladies and gentlemen, all of us have these problems. They're just different with different names and different faces, but I think we can solve all of them. So thank you.
Senator Bergen, thank you so much. I have so many questions for each of you. We'll get to a little bit of Q&A and conversation here in just a moment, but I want to bring Maryland Senator Antonio Hayes into the conversation. Senator Hayes, I know that paid family leave has been one of the big victories in Maryland here recently. Bring us up to speed on how that came to be and what exactly has passed in Maryland.
Absolutely, and thank you, Dan, and Dr. Osborne for having us. And thank you to the Prenatal to 3 Coalition for having us. You know, in Maryland, it's been a long time coming. For the last couple of years, we've tried very hard at passing paid family leave, because we know that it's very important, especially, also, in addition to being here, I am the proud having my first child at 7 months. Little Antonio Agapito, welcome to the family. And so for me, this year, getting this bill passed after introducing it for 3 years was, such an accomplishment. And we know that, those early years of bonding with a child and his parents are so important to their growth and health. And so we passed the legislation this year for the first time. We're looking forward to implementing it and very, very soon. We know that access to paid family leave is one key way that states can ensure that infants and toddlers get off to a healthy start. Many of you probably already know that, paid family leave boosts the maternal labor force attachment and increase family economic security, as well as improve mental health. I heard good senator referred to that, as many families go through this. It fosters better parent and child relationships, as well as support health and development. And so we're very proud to be in Maryland. 12 states have already adopted statewide paid family leave programs. 7 have fully implemented these benefits. And this year, both Maryland and Delaware voted to enact the paid family leave. And so we're looking forward, as well as many families here looking to take advantage of the paid family leave.
Senator, thank you so much. And I want to ask each of you maybe and some of you have already hit a little bit on this, but, because we are here in this conversation about the needs of infants and toddlers in particular, a lot of these policy conversations, whether it's the earned income tax credit or, minimum wage, may well not be topics that the public sort of that immediately springs to mind. Oh well, increasing minimum wage has a direct link to the well-being of infants and toddlers, for example. So I want to give each of you just a moment to say a little bit more about kind of the direct link and how you see these policies impacting infants and toddlers and their families. And maybe Senator San Bonaventura, we can begin with you. I mean, as I mentioned, minimum wage is something probably that people think frequently. Oh, well, that's about the parent. That's how much how. So help us make the link. How is Hawaii increasing minimum wage going to be beneficial, in particular, to infants and toddlers?
Well, we know that early childhood development helps infants and toddlers, right? So usually the lowest paid worker, and we're all we're all guilty of this, is we pay our babysitters minimum wage or even less. And we consider early childhood educators as those who are just basically babysitting, when in fact, we are entrusting our most treasured possessions, our most treasured lives, really, with these early childhood educators. So we really need to pay them minimum wage. I mean, we really need to pay them well, especially when we are entrusting them with the lives of our kids. And we want to make sure that the people who are taking care of our kids are paid well enough so that they won't be juggling with other stressors, so that they can make ends meet. So that's, to me, a direct link. We want to make sure that the people who take care of our kids get paid well enough so that they do not have to endanger our kids' lives when they end up struggling with other jobs or just to make their ends meet. Thank you.
Senator, thank you, and what a powerful connection that really is, because the child care sector in particular across the country really continues to struggle with this. There's a compensation crisis happening in child care that is leading ultimately to an access crisis and an affordability crisis for families. I don't know if you all saw, but the Washington Post just yesterday published an interesting editorial piece on sort of the need for the country to come together better around the needs of childcare in the country, and they made the link very specifically to the compensation of that workforce, and that particularly during COVID right now, what we have found is that a lot of fast food restaurants and big box stores and Amazon and others, have increased their starting wages in a way that childcare has really had difficulty keeping pace. And so, I can speak from the Institute, the Hunt Institute's perspective. It's been fascinating to watch. Even with the availability of federal COVID relief dollars right now, through which many states are working to, ideally increase access, for example, to child care subsidy, that many states are struggling, even though they've said, okay, we're going to use these federal dollars to help increase access to families, maybe raise the income floor at the point at which families would qualify. But they've had much more difficulty actually fulfilling that promise, in part because they've had difficulty finding adults to staff these classrooms. We, during, as we came out of sort of the worst part of the onset of the pandemic, the many states restricted enrollment, based on public health concerns, and so maybe a classroom that originally held 20 students now held 10. But as those restrictions have been lifted, we are finding around the country that childcare is really not bouncing back to capacity, and it is really all linked very much, Senator, back to what you're discussing here in terms of the compensation of the workforce. So it's a real challenge, and childcare is really struggling there. So thank you for helping us to make that connection. Senator Bergen, let's talk about the connection. And I know you mentioned a couple of examples as you were introducing, but help us to link North Carolina's Medicaid expansion, again, kind of explicitly to the needs of the youngest children and their families.
And I think part of it, and I want to talk about minimum wage just a minute. I'm a guy, a free market guy, and the effective minimum wage is $15 now. People can say whatever it is. I think the free market drives that. When the local Chick-fil-A's are paying $19 and all of that, and one of my big concerns right now is all states, I think, used a lot of their federal dollars to subsidize childcare and nursing homes. And we all have a situation that's coming up next year where we're going to have to figure out how to pay this, because what I've learned in my business career, if you give somebody a raise, you can't take it away from them. So the way they look at it, if you went from $12.25 an hour as a daycare worker to $15, you're not going to go back to $12.25. You're not going to be able to keep people doing that. And we all need to be preparing for that. Now, I like to talk about the threes. I like to talk about the 3 months after conception, the 3 months after birth, the first 3 years in third grade. I want to monitor those kids in those stages and track them, and I think we'll have great outcomes. I am big on, as soon as a woman finds out she's expecting, I want her to have a doctor's appointment. I want her to start on prenatal vitamins, the folic acids, and all that. I've just been talking to the healthcare providers in North Carolina about doula services. I think that I want every child to have the opportunity for a healthy birth and a great life. And one of the things that I've been talking, I was on a phone call with our Secretary Kinsley in the White House, and I have talked to the Deputy Secretary of DHHS. Something that I'd like to try in North Carolina with Medicaid is to take people that are on Medicaid and give them child care and free community college, because I want Medicaid to be a place where people go for a short time, and then we offer them ways to get them off of Medicaid. I don't want people staying on Medicaid the rest of their lives. I think it's bad for them. I think people want to be self-sufficient, self-reliant, and take care of them and their families. And I don't think a government program that puts somebody in it and leaves them there is fair to anybody involved, especially young children. I want to change the whole mindset of how we look at Medicaid and let it be a temporary service that we give people great care while they're there, provide for them and their families, but give them an avenue to a better life. And I just think we've got to take a different approach and be willing to spend some money to do it. But folks, next year, we've got some issues coming up, because I don't think the federal government's going to be able to send us the kind of money they did during the pandemic. And we have to start adjusting. And North Carolina has been really smart to start putting money back for that. We've got a good fund balance right now, one of the best in the country, and I think we're going to be prepared to deal with it.
Senator, thank you. And I love the concept of the threes as well. I'm gonna steal that and attribute it to you everywhere I go.
Just give me credit. You can use it, no charge. Just give me credit.
I love it. Senator Hayes, let's turn to you. I sort of set this up by saying, people don't necessarily think of these policies as being related in all cases to infants and toddlers. Paid family leave actually may be a place where that connection is a little bit more natural. And I know that you expanded on this a little bit in your original answer, but take a moment to talk about what's the impact of paid family leave on newborn babies, for example.
No, absolutely, Dan, and thank you for the opportunity. And shout out to my colleague from Hawaii, the senator, for lifting up the child care workers. Most of them, probably in Hawaii, other states just like they are in Maryland, are female entrepreneurs that just aren't treated as such. And showing them some sense of dignity and making sure that they have the wages is so important. When I first embarked upon the journey of, introducing this legislation before the legislature, I had the awesome responsibility, after all of the safety nets fell from beneath me at an early age, to be raised by my grandmother. And my grandmother, who is one of the strongest people that I've ever known, took care of me even until I matriculated from college. In the later years, she succumbed to Alzheimer's which then the tables turned. And so we had the take on a responsibility. Myself and a couple of family members had to take on a responsibility of taking care of her care. And so for so many families, whether it's, having a new child or taking care of a loved one, oftentimes they have to make the decision on whether or not to put food on their table or, by going to work or spending time with their loved ones. And I think paid family leave is one of those things that we should be doing as a society, and the rest of the global world have been doing way before we have, and recognizing the importance of, families and the moments that they spend together, even when they're most vulnerable, are important to uplift them. So I'm really excited that with our paid family leave bill in Maryland, we expanded the definition of family just to accommodate some of those things. And so we're looking at, whether you have a new child, and then family also, is extended in the version of identifying grandparents as family as well, which, not all of the other leave programs around the state have.
Senator, thank you. And let's move on maybe to another topic. As we're thinking about creating and enacting these kinds of important policies for children and families, certainly the case may be in some states more than others, depending on the partisan makeup. But generally speaking, this is a question of developing bipartisan support where policymakers from across the aisle can come together and unite around these topics. So want to invite each of you to peel back some of the process maybe in how this happened in your states, and what advice you have in terms of developing bipartisan supports around the needs of infants and toddlers. And maybe we'll mix up the order too. I think Senator Bergen, it might be interesting to start with you. You mentioned that that North Carolina was one of a handful of states that chose originally not to expand Medicaid, but here you're describing action in the Senate that almost on a unanimous bipartisan basis. At this point, you were able to garner support for doing that. Talk to us a little bit about what broke the logjam, as it were, and what was the impetus for getting to this step where you had such overwhelming support at this point.
Dan, I think part of the problem always was who's on Medicaid. And the statistics show that it was a lot of single people and men, they were in that gap. They didn't make enough to, they made too much to be on Medicaid, but not enough to get on the affordable health plan. And I'm in the insurance business, so I dealt with this from day one. I'm a CMS contractor, and I do health insurance for multiple companies, and did it. And I'd have people that would come in, and they were in that gap, but the affordable health care we were selling them had such a high deductible that they really the second year a lot of them dropped it. Mm-hmm. So I tell stories about some of the folks I know. I know a 26-year-old guy right now. He got on drugs when he was in high school. He lives with his grandparents, and he doesn't want to work. I've tried to give him a job. I was going to get him a scholarship to go to community college free, but he doesn't want to work. He wants to just stay there and do what he's doing. And he would be he would go on Medicaid under an expansion. So, and there's stories like that are all around. But I think all of us want to take care of kids. I tell folks I want to take care of children. I want to take care of the elderly, the disabled. I want everybody else to work. I think that it's a blessing to work, and I think that human dignity is derived from hard work. But I don't want to take that away from folks. And the other thing that concerns me right now is the redetermination. The estimate is that we have between 300,000 and 500,000 people on the North Carolina rolls that shouldn't be there because they went on during the pandemic. And we can't take anybody off yet. We won't be able to until the federal government makes up its mind about when this is going to stop. So, when those come off, and then that roughly 600,000 that are estimated to go on, I think we're going to have pretty well stay about the same where we are. It was about 2.7 million people in North Carolina. But think about it, under Medicaid expansion, if we added 600,000 people 1/3 of the population of the state of North Carolina would be on Medicaid. Folks, that is not sustainable in the long term. That's why I want people to get jobs. Any business that has 1/3 of its people that aren't showing up for work and are being paid will not survive. So we've got some tough decisions to make. But I think right now we're prepared to do it. We're prepared to work out the details. As I said, I have asked to look at waivers, pilots. I'm willing to try a lot of different things. And the folks that we put through community college program and make sure that they're ready to work, we're going to make sure they've got jobs, because there's plenty of jobs in North Carolina. I told folks the other day, the hot light is on and there's no waiting. So, we got plenty of jobs to give people in North Carolina.
Senator, thank you. Senator Hayes, talk to us a little bit about Maryland's experience as you were working to enact more paid family leave. Was there a partisan divide initially in that conversation? And if so, how did you help to overcome it and unite as lawmakers around this topic?
Yeah, I think the situation in Maryland is a little bit different in that, our legislature and the majority party are Democrats. We have a Republican governor, but we have a super majority in both the House and the Senate. And in the committee that I sit in, that is typically, we almost have consensus on just about everything. This was a contentious issue. And, because many of the businesses in our communities thought that it would be too much of a burden on them. And so we made some slight adjustments to the legislation to afford some ways that especially expressly identify if a business or employer can show that there was financial harm done to their business, that they could be exempt out. But at the end of the day, we passed the legislation in both the House and the Senate. The governor vetoed the legislation, and we overturned the governor's veto within 24 hours. And so we didn't enjoy the bipartisanship that we wish we would have. But at the end of the day, I believe, especially, in the next upcoming session, we'll have an opportunity to dig further into the details around like some of the percentage and things like that. And so hopefully, I'm optimistic that we'll enjoy a more bipartisan product that everyone can live with.
Senator, thank you. And Senator San Bonaventura, I want to talk a little bit about Hawaii. I mean, you passed not one but three important innovations. Talk to us a little bit about the consensus building process and how you went about getting that moved along politically in Hawaii.
So we are very different from North Carolina. Okay, we only have one Republican in the Senate. And we only have four.
That is very different from North Carolina.
In the House, less than 10%. So it's really the battle wasn't so much on the Medicaid expansions, surprisingly, or even in the earned income tax credit. It was on the minimum wage. And so when you have Democrats controlling both House and Senate, it was actually a fight between the House and the Senate. The more conservative Democrats in the House versus the more liberal Democrats in the Senate. So we were fighting amongst each other. But I think the reality was in the state of Hawaii, like I had said, when our economy hugely expanded, the minimum wage talk wasn't really, the reality was minimum wage in Hawaii was already $15 an hour. I mean, we saw signs over in Burger King and McDonald's because we had such shortage of labor force that they were starting pay was $15, $17 an hour. So it wasn't too much of a stretch to ask the Chamber of Commerce to, since the free market, as Senator Bergen has pointed out, has already shown that minimum wage in the state of Hawaii is higher than what is proposed. Why don't we guarantee it? Why don't we guarantee a floor then? And we've already passed the removal of the sub-minimum wage for disabled workers, which was like unanimous in both House and Senate earlier, that it wasn't much of a stretch. Like I said, again, the fight was amongst the the conservative Democrats versus the more liberal Democrats, but we had a bicameral support, especially with this expansion in our economy. And we hope that expansion continues. So long as you folks over in the mainland keep coming to Hawaii, we will. So thank you.
Senator Bergen, as we wrap up this particular question, as North Carolina is maybe a little bit more politically diverse than the two other examples, what advice would you have maybe to other policymakers who are watching today around building a sort of consensus across party lines on issues like these?
I think, Dan, the first thing, you got to talk to each other. I have a policy. I'll talk to anybody about anything. And I might not necessarily agree with it, but we've got to be civil too. The days of us shouting at each other and fussing, I tell folks all the time, I want to be seen as a statesman who is civil. I think civility is so important. And we need to show each other some mercy and grace, because there are going to be things we're going to be passionate about. I'm passionate about mental health. I want us to, as a society, to say, we got to deal with mental health. I'm passionate about young people not using drugs. We've got to figure out smartly how to convince them not to even try drugs. I talked to a mother just before 5 minutes before this started. A mother was telling me about her 19-year-old son that had passed away from a drug overdose. And those things, as here again, as a person of faith, those things really concern me. We've got to talk about a lot of folks right now are facing hopelessness and helplessness. Those two words in our society very concern me. I hear it from young people a lot, especially young people that attempt suicide, talking about hopelessness. And then a lot of the older folks, I hear them talking about a sense of helplessness. So I encourage all of my colleagues, let's talk. We're smart. We can figure these things out. We need to have a vision for what we want our states to look like. But I want North Carolina to be first in health. So I challenge my colleagues. And I was in Hawaii earlier in the year in Maui, and she knows that, and had a great time. I helped with their taxes over there. So I expect all of them to come to North Carolina to the beach. I'm at Wrightsville Beach at this convention right now. So come to the beach. We have some nice beaches in North Carolina and spend that money from the state of Hawaii.
As a fellow citizen of the Carolinas, Senator, I echo your desire. We've got just a couple of minutes left before we turn things back over to Cynthia for the next portion of the program. And I want to spend that time really thinking ahead toward the future. We are all here as guests of the Prenatal to 3 Policy Impact Center today in this conversation, and so I am always thinking the roadmap is such a powerful document that where they have laid out these evidence-based policies, for the good of infants and toddlers. But Senator Bergen also referenced early on specifically the challenge that states may encounter here as we're winding down, the expenditure of one-time federal dollars that have been allocated to the states, as part of the COVID relief packages. What do you see as next, maybe, and maybe can give you a 2 minutes or so apiece to see, sort of looking into the future, what do you see as next steps in your state in terms of advancing these policies for infants and toddlers in this context? And Senator San Bonaventura, why don't we start with you this time?
Okay, so next steps, like I said, I really want to ensure that our child care workers and early learning educators are going to continue to be compensated, and not just with the ARPA monies that we got or the block grant monies that we've got from the federal government. So one of the ideas I'm trying to get our both chambers to agree to is basically offer some kind of grant with an employer match to ensure that childcare near the workplace will start happening. Okay, so that way we could have, hopefully, we could have the synergy of helping employers get employees. We have a huge shortage, by the way, in the state of Hawaii. We don't have enough of everybody. We don't have enough police officers. We don't have enough educators. We don't have enough service workers. So, but there is this pool of parents who cannot work when they cannot entrust their kids. So I'm hoping that that's going to be one of my next steps, would be to see whether or not we can have a public-private partnership to ensuring that childcare and the childcare workforce will continue to be paid well by having an employer match and not just a government match, and not just their minimum wage to continue working. And of course, I want to follow through and make sure that, that all of these incentives we brought up this past year will continue to hold forth. Like, I want to see whether or not my child wellness bill, which hopefully will catch all those who are homeschooled, will have eyes on their kids to ensure that there's no abuse and no lack of nutrition. Okay. So right now in the state of Hawaii, we have, at least on my island, because we are in a rural community, all of our lunches and breakfasts, so long as they go to school, are paid for. So we want to make sure that this nutrition follows through also on homeschooled kids. So that's my wish.
Senator, thank you. Let's turn to Maryland. Senator Hayes, looking into your crystal ball here in terms of next steps for our youngest children in Maryland. What do you see on the horizon as next steps for Maryland?
No, I think for us, workforce is definitely similar, is going to be an issue. It's going to be a challenge, as the pandemic have changed kind of the workplace as we know it. A lot of people are choosing to work in a home environment a lot more. And so we're going to have to see what impact that may have on if, folks decide to take care of their own home. What does that look like for our young people and with parents working at home and kids there. And so that's going to be a huge challenge for us and trying to, in a post-pandemic environment, to see, how do we operate moving forward, and what does the workplace look like is definitely going to be our biggest challenge.
Senator, thank you. And Senator Bergen, we'll turn to North Carolina and give you the last word. What do you see on the horizon for infants and toddlers in the Tar Heel State?
We're investing money. We've invested $20 million in capital grants for startup for North Carolina pre-K and for child care centers. I think we've got to look at how to do more with child care. I want to start child care centers on every community college campus. We have 58 community colleges. If we have child care at every community college, parents could take their kids there and go to school and eventually get to where they can pay for their kids to be in programs. I think we ought to look at putting child care centers in nursing homes. We need workers in nursing homes. If we've got parents that put the child care there, plus older people love kids. And I think it's good for children to be around older people. Some of my best memories are being around my grandparents all the time. And so I just think we here again, we need to be thoughtful on how we approach things and be willing to try new things that help everybody.
And Senator, there's some wonderful intergenerational child care programs around the country. We'd love to help you to connect with those. Well, Senator Jim Bergen of North Carolina, State Senator Joyce Ann Bonaventura of Hawaii, and Senator Antonio Hayes of Maryland. First off, thank you for the work that you do, and thank you for your leadership on behalf of the youngest citizens of your state. And second, thank you for taking the time out to participate in this conversation today. We have learned a lot, and it's been terrific to be with you. And Dr. Osborne, a great conversation. And I think at this point we'll turn things back over to you for the next phase of the program.
Wow. Well, thank you, Dan, and thank you to all of you. I cannot tell you how grateful I am to hear all that you're doing and the energy that you have. And Dan, your words that you said at the end were pretty much the exact words that I was going to say. Just so grateful for you to share your insights and expertise, and for the valuable work that you do in championing efforts to support our children and families in your states. And I'm just really appreciative of that. So thank you.